And the number one topic out of those 347 was remembering and reclaiming our stories, reclaiming our achievements, our perceived failures, whatever it might be. But going through that process myself, I realized that I've been doing this for years. Been doing it in my own life. I've been doing it with clients, and the reflection back from 3 years of interviewing women over 50, that was the consistent, overarching theme going through every single interview. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to a couple of the women who really represent, not only in the interviews that we had, but in the work that they do, the way that they show up, the stories that they share, the stories that they tell. And then I'm going to share a little bit more about where I am right now and how I got here. So this one's going to be a little longer than usual, but I think it's important because there is this is really the crux of everything. And I'm just going to kind of walk you through, and there is an accompanying article that will be up later today. But I've been, working on it and reworking it because it really is the core of everything that we start to kind of think differently about as we hit midlife and beyond. Okay, so I'm just going to dive right in. Please put your comments in the thread. If you've got stories to share them in the comments. What I've learned is the comments on the live stream only live for a little while, and I can't go back and get them. But just hit reply on the emails, whatever. Just like share your stories somehow, and I will factor it into all of the communications I'm creating around this. But the overarching message is that we are remembering and reclaiming. We're not reinventing. Okay, reinvention is a term that I have learned. Well, I consider it a construct for imposter syndrome, to make us feel small, to make us feel insignificant, to make us doubt our own value, our own worth, our own lived experiences. And I put a lot of thought and research into this. I've done research. One of the first things I always do is keyword research because I've done SEO for a long time. And the terms that people are using to advertise to women in mid-age and their second act and their third act, whatever, however you want to label it, is about starting over, burning down what we've already done, like our hair and our makeup and all of these different things. But it so rarely talks about like the wisdom that we've acquired over 30, 40, 50 years even of working and contributing and being part of other things. And everybody that I'm going to introduce you to today has built a body of work around reclaiming that. So I just wanted to start with that, and I'm going to kind of move in to introducing you to some women from my community. So the first one is Cameron Uban, and she is the host of the podcast 50 Not Dead. And what she shared in her interview, when I interviewed her probably a year and a half ago, maybe more, was that when she was coming up to do her um, um, fourth edition, like the fourth series of her podcast, she had interviewed um, psychologist and author um, Nancy Collier, and she's also the author of The Emotionally Exhausted Woman. But she talks about when we're 12 years old, or in middle school, in that in that very dark phase of growing up, we make a deal with the devil just so we can stay popular, so we could stay with the in crowd. So we give away a little part of who we are so we could fit in. And that's where it really starts. And not only is that happening, but we're also going through puberty. And for some reason, other things happen in our lives, like if we come from a family of divorced parents or separated parents or some kind of fragmented marriage, that sometimes happens in that phase of life too. The parents start to think, well, they're old enough now, they could deal with it. Or if you move when you're in the seventh grade, that's like a really, really tender age to be moving into a new community with new people. So think of all of these things that are happening at that stage of life. And, everything is amplified, everything is scarier, and now you start to feel like you need to fit in. So you now start with this, and if you do any research around girls that have eating disorders, a lot of it starts at that age. So we are figuring out ways that we can fit in, not realizing that they're harmful to us. And one of the ways is we put aside who we are and we decide we're going to be somebody else because that's what's acceptable, and that starts a pattern. And so Cameron talked about that, and she also if you go back and listen to the fourth season of her podcast, every single interview has that premise as the backbone. And the next person I want to introduce you to is Judy Harrington, known on Substack as Judy 411, and it's Judy with an I. And she is also an author, and she is brilliant and hilariously funny. So you definitely want to connect with her. But when I interviewed her, she talked about her 30 years of marriage and motherhood felt like a weird detour. Like, it took her so far away from who she was, she had to come back around and figure it out again. And she said now that she is, after 30 years, she's remembering who she was. And she's, if you go and read her Substack, you're going to watch her doing this in action. She's reclaiming these different parts of her life, these different parts of her story. And this just keeps happening over and over again. And as I'm sharing these women with you, and I'm sharing these stories, my own included, there are no coincidences. This is happening. And it's happening systemically in our society, and it's happening for each of us individually. And we have choices. We can decide, do we want to continue to fit in like we're 12 years old? Or do we want to own who we are and everything that we've accomplished? And I'm all for owning everything I've accomplished. And I can tell you the 178 women in my community are too. So that is Judy and Cameron. Next, I want to introduce you to, I just have some notes because I don't want to forget, Mal Dwayne. Mal Dwayne is, oh my God, she's got such a great story. In the 1960s, she was a top fashion model. She was kind of dubbed the Twiggy, the US version of Twiggy. If you know who Twiggy was, she was a British fashion model that was very popular. And from the outside, she was living this total glam life, all the best clothes, photo shoots, on yachts in Europe, all over the place. And on the inside, she was a highly functioning alcoholic and had been for a long time. And, she got to the point of being, um, you know, experiencing her dark night of the soul. And that led her to Alcoholics Anonymous and led her to, a long and sometimes hard healing journey. But it also brought her to her spiritual connection, first with herself, and then to learn how to help others through coaching, through writing, through podcast interviews. And she was one of my clients probably 15 years ago, and I helped her market her first book and taught her how to get on podcasts. But through her healing, she when she started, like after modeling, she had started working in real estate. And after she had started to get sober and work more from an internal space than an external space, she tripled her real estate business, and she started helping other women get into real estate, and all the while deepening her spiritual learnings. And now she's um, you know in her 80s, and she's traveling. She's in Asia right now for a month. But she has done incredible work and she's helped so many people. And I've been following along with her for 15 years and I've watched the way that she has build boundaries around relationships um, and continue learning um, and growing and um, being adamant about what she will accept and what she won't in her life, and then modeling that and teaching it to others. And she's just an absolutely incredible woman, and she is now living fully from the inside out. Um, Right after I started this Real 50 Over 50 interviews 3 years ago, and actually yesterday was our official 3rd birthday, um, Julia Louis-Dreyfus launched her podcast maybe 2 or 3 weeks after I launched, and her podcast is called Wiser Than Me. And she had her Jane Fonda as her first guest, and I, of course, was listening because I was like, "Oh my god, we're doing the same thing," and it really is very similar. Our She's speaking to women who are older than her and wiser than her, so most of her guests are 70 and above, but most of the guests, all of the guests that I've had are over 50, but there are quite a few, almost all of them in the 60 to 70 range, and we've got women all the way up to 85. So it's really just an amazing group of women that have lived extraordinary lives, and they're not done yet. But anyway, back to Jane Fonda. What Jane Fonda talked about on Julia Louis Dreyfus's podcast was when she was 58 years old, she did a life review because she felt like there's got to be more than this, and I've got years to go, and I'm not done yet. And um, she talked about this life review, and then right when they started, they lost power and they had to stop the interview and come back to it. So I have a story like that too. I was interviewing somebody and she was in Pennsylvania, I was in New York, and we both experienced an earthquake. And our screen started to shake and the ground started to shake under us until we figured out what it was. But we stayed on through the whole earthquake. It was really kind of wild. But anyway, back to Jane Fonda again. I'm just going all over the place here. Jane Fonda talked about being 58, doing this life review, and um, recognizing that she wasn't done. She had a lot more to do. But what she did was she reclaimed these parts of her past. She reclaimed the relationship she had with husbands and romantic partners in her life, and realized she's never getting married again. That she lost so much of herself in her marriages that for this third act, and she called it her third act, she was not going to get married again. She was just, she had relationships that was fine, but they were not going to be to the level of a marriage or that level of commitment because she was making that commitment to herself. And, and she's gone on to do extraordinary things. So that really got me thinking because at the time I was 58 and I was at this like turning point in my business, in my life. My son had just gone off to college and my business was changing, I was changing, and I felt very aligned with what she was talking about. And now reflecting back on all these conversations that I've had, a lot of the women that I've spoken to were in their late 50s and early 60s, and it's all very similar. It's like we're experiencing the same thing. It's not an accident. It's really something that happens. So it was just really validating that it's happening for all of us. It's happening in different ways, but the journey is the same. We get into this phase of I don't want to be somebody else anymore. I made that deal with the devil when I was 12. But I don't want to be that person. I want to be me. And then you start to look at all the things, the you know, promotion you didn't go for because there was somebody else in the room that you thought deserved it, or you wouldn't get it because of that person. The things that you didn't do because you had to take care of your kids or an aging parent, or you had a health issue yourself, but things that you put aside that 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 are like that hurt. It hurt to do that. And now's the time where we could take them back, and we have the space to do them because those kids are off. And like one of the things that I did this weekend is I took over my son's room, and I'm reclaiming the space in my house. And that is like it's a three-phase project. The first phase was he had a loft bed mounted to his wall. I had to get somebody to come and help me take this off. So my friend Val came over with a saw, and we took this thing apart bit by bit, and we moved it down to my basement, and we created a beautiful guest suite. So phase one is done. The new office is a blank slate. The trip to Lowe's happened yesterday. I have cans of paint. That is happening this week after work every night. I'll do a little bit more, a little bit. By next Monday, you will see me in a new space. And the third part is my office is now currently in my dining room. So I'm going to reclaim my dining room and start to seat people around the table and cook meals and invite people over. And these are things I haven't been able to do because my office has always been wherever there was space to stick my desk. But now I'll have a space, and that gets me really excited about what's possible when I reclaim the space for the business that I'm building, the business that I redesigned based on what I want, not based on what people needed. And that was all very much in alignment with what Jane Fonda talks about in her interview with Julia Louis Dreyfus. And then the next woman I want to introduce you to is Diana Place. And we can simply not have a conversation about third acts without Diana Place being in that conversation. Um, she was faced with a life threatening cancer diagnosis. And in the middle of this, she asked herself, or maybe somebody else asked the question, we never know. We never know where those profound questions come from. But it was a Mary Oliver quote. And, it was like, I'm going to paraphrase now, but it was like, you have this one wild life. What are you going to do with it? And, Diana's response to that was creating spaces for women in their third acts or approaching their third acts to have a place to figure it out. So she started with creating a business called Third Act Quest, and she did. Oh, no, Diana's chiming in the comments. She listened to that Jane Fonda interview, and she instantly named her business Third Act Quest. There you go. See, I'm not making this stuff up. It is all connected. It is all connected. We're remembering and we're connecting. And I'm just going to take a little sidebar here because Diana and I lurked around each other for a long time, and we finally met maybe 8 or 9 months ago. And we were fast friends, and we are doing the same work in different ways, and it is so aligned. And but we're creating the space for women to share their stories, and for women to really reclaim who they are. So when they share those stories, they're sharing their full story. They're not sharing a different version of it, and they're not sharing something that was sanitized to fit in. It's real. But back to Diana. So she started with Third Act Quest, and then she created a community called the 333 Collective. She hosts events, and she's got one coming up in April in Santa Fe. And this one is going to be a little different because she's starting a third part of her business called Aha Stories. And what the Aha Stories are, it's a stage for women to get up there and to tell their stories, to tell the stories of that aha moment, like when she had that aha moment when she learned that she had cancer. And what was she going to do about it? Was she just going to give into it, or was she going to fight? And she fought, and she's here, and she's fine. Thank goodness she's fine, because she's got work to do. We don't have time for her to have cancer. It's not allowed. But she is creating a stage where and cultivating helping women cultivate their stories to stand on that stage and to tell their story in front of other people. When that happens, that becomes real. That story becomes real to you. That story becomes real to who's listening to it. There's a level of trust that's built, self-trust and trust with the audience. And when you have that level of trust with the audience, you can tell that story again and again and again. And every time you tell it, that self trust that you have inside of you grows. That's contagious, way more contagious than cancer. And that is contagious. Other people pick that up. And then they have the courage to stand up and tell their story. And then their self-trust grows. And it goes on and on and on and on. And that's what Diana is creating. That's what I'm creating. And I could not have this conversation today without bringing her into it, because she has dedicated her what's left of her amazing life to doing this, as have I, and as has the next person that I'm going to introduce you to, Lori Seymour. Lori Seymour and I met probably about a year and a half ago. I honestly cannot even tell you who introduced us, but we had an instant connection. And when I interviewed her, she was talking about, well, she had not yet published her book. Her book, Unconditional Remembrance, which I helped her name. But this book had not been published yet, but she was working on it, and she was calling it The Original Blessing. And the original blessing is your connection to source. It's your connection to yourself. And throughout that interview, she dropped so many seeds that ultimately became this book. And Lori helps people understand that they have to do that internal work. They have to connect with who they are, and forget certain things. But the onus is not on the forgetting. It's about the remembering. You remember these parts of yourself that, again, that you put aside for some reason or another. And when you start to pull these pieces together, you are reintroduced to this version of yourself that you almost don't recognize, but you want to know better. And it's just an unbelievable experience. And Lori, she has this way of helping you kind of go through the layers to find those pieces. So, like, I want you to now, like, think for a minute of all of these women that I've just connected you to, including Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Jane Fonda, who will probably never hear this, but we'll include them anyway. um, but it's all about connection. It's these different connection points within yourself, within other people, how we find each other, how we support each other, um, how we build this layer of trust that connects. It's happening. And when you tap into it and become part of it, it really fundamentally changes who you are. So I will include in the article, I'll include the link to the article on the replay of this, but there will be links to connect with all of these women. Please connect with them. And I want to share a little bit about, my reclaiming my space. For the last for the last 6 years, I've been dealing with an AFib diagnosis that is not typical. I have had 4 ablations, and it doesn't seem to be going away. So I spent the first 4 years of this just trying to kick AFib's ass, and it was not going to come back. But I've since had to come to terms with it's not going away. So I had to adjust my own expectations. And there is this part of reclaiming my space in my home that is helping my body heal. Um, I was able to do things this weekend with, like, just moving furniture and climbing up and down stairs, carrying heavy things. There were so many days I could not have physically done that. And I was able to do that. And I'm a little achy, but I'm okay. And that was evidence for me that I can trust my body more than I thought I could. And that's a gift that this reclaiming of my space is giving back to me. And, so there's so many layers to all of this and more connection points. So as you're thinking of your own stories, think of what I shared, think of the stories of these other women that I shared stories about, and like, where do you fit into all of that? And, one of the reasons that I'm bringing this all over to Substack is because we can own our stories here. We can own our voice here. We can own our content. We can own our list. We can't do that on LinkedIn. We can't do that on other social platforms. Um, I have been active on this platform for a little over a month, and there's already been at least 11 changes to make it easier to use or easier to connect. Um, so it just feels like the right place to bring this level of depth of again, connection. It all goes back to connection, right? Its connection is to our own remembering, to our own reclaiming, and how we bring this to other people. And Substack is just a better platform to do it on. It's built for it, more so than LinkedIn. And I'm not going to give up on LinkedIn. I've kind of given up on Facebook and Instagram, but I'm not going to give up on LinkedIn. I'm just going to use it differently. And this is going to be more of the home of my content because I can own the direction of it here. And that's what I want for other people too. And there are three different subscriber levels, but the founding level is the one where, I'm going to share things that like people were paying me $5,000 for. I'm going to share it for $300 for the year because I feel so powerful about this. I feel so strongly about this that our stories need to get out there. We need to connect in meaningful ways, and we need to do this together. There is no competition around this. This is just community. And that's really what I'm building here. And I'd love for everyone to join me and be able to do this work together because this is what matters. And this is what is going to allow us to have sustainable businesses for as long as we choose to have them, and to work and uh, under our own, like, what we want, to create businesses around what we want, what we love to do, how we help people, what matters to us. um, I just see such opportunity that I didn't see on the other platforms, and um, and I'm excited to share it, and I'm excited to share it through these interviews. So this was day 6. I went on for 30 minutes, which I'm only supposed to do 15 according to my own self-imposed rules, but I thought that this one was more important than some of the others. Not that the others aren't important, but this is really the foundation of everything. So thank you for joining me. I will be back tomorrow with more. The replays are all available if you just go to my Substack, and I've been incorporating the articles and the live streams in one article, so you could see it all together. And please connect if you have questions, if you have ideas, if you have stories to share. Connect. I want to hear all about them. And have a great day, everybody. And I will be back tomorrow with more. Actually, tomorrow I'll be at 4 o'clock, not 10 o'clock, 4 p.m. Eastern, because I have an appointment at 10. So I will see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. Thanks.